Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Beauty and the Beast. Very interesting episode this week. We kind of see the continuation of basically, Kat and Vincent kind of struggling to keep balance, with work as well as the relationship, while also balancing dealing with hunting down this beast hunters. So I really like the fact is that the clue that they got in this episode was the fact that he turned out it's like, oh, that guy is like, oh yeah, we rescued him. Actually, it turns out to be he ends up being an assassin. So the whole point was to kind of draw Vincent out. It seems whoever the person is that set out the bounty narrowed it down that it was Vincent. I guess considering all the hunters that were kind of sent that direction, it's like, well, I guess it was easy to kind of narrow down who the person is, but because they just needed to prove it by drawing Vincent out, and they successfully did that. I didn't think he was going to be an assassin. I figured like, okay, with his, when they looked him up and it's like, oh, his records only go back about 4 years with some of his money and stuff like that. I was like, okay, it's going to turn out the guy that he's trying to say that like, oh, he's going to DHS and saying, I'm going to turn on this guy. I was like, he's actually the guy he's claiming that he's going to turn on. But it's like, nope, he ends up being an assassin. Which we didn't see that other side of it in this episode. That has to suck for his wife and children, because they talked about the fact is that him and his wife said that they became very distant when they had children. Obviously, I do like that about the show that it does that. Obviously, plenty of shows do that, but I like it. It's very prevalent in this one, in this show where it's like, certain things kind of reflect Kat and Vincent's relationship. This particular episode is like, this married couple, they were married, they had a good marriage, but it's like they slowly kind of drifted apart when they had children, because it just, with any marriage, there's already, struggles to kind of, you have to keep up with everything else, plus, maintaining the relationship. But it's like once they had kids, it just became a little too overwhelming, and they just drifted apart, which affects Kat because, the whole thinking she's pregnant thing. Which I will say, like, I think she kind of pushed, Vince in a way. Like, she did admit that she was like, she didn't kind of want to deny it as long as possible, because like the more she denied it, the less real it became. Because there was a part of her that wanted a kid, but at the same time, there was a part of her that was scared to have a kid too. So, because it also, the question came up this episode, because I was wondering, I was like, has that ever come up before about kids? Like, being, Vincent being a beast, like. She said, yeah, we don't know for sure whether or not that transfers or not. But it's like, but then Vincent brought up, I was like, but did you forget about Tori? And, things didn't work out for her. Granted, it was very dormant. It just like, because it could easily be when they have a child, it's kind of dormant like Tori's case. But it's like the moment, a situation happens, the beast inside could be activated, because easily, even though it might not be activated, maybe it'd be an issue. Because, it could be something that's like, it's buried underneath. Like, say, like, even though the beast hasn't come out, but maybe their child ends up having anger issues, and they don't really understand why. And it's obviously because of that beast side of things. Which is kind of interesting, like, because to me, I thought about that in the back of my mind. I was like, that's another reason not to have kids, because you're worried about the whole beast thing. Except they didn't really bring it up at first. That wasn't one of the main reasons. Because Vincent specifically never brought it up. I was like, I felt like that'd be one of the major reasons you bring up about being reluctant to have kids. But to him, he brought up other valid points as well, being like, being in the situation they are right now, they barely can handle, like, being, dealing with themselves, being a married couple with, on top of everything else they're doing, they're stretched very thin. So it's like adding a kid on top of that, especially seeing how it's like, he even brought up the point, like, he's like, are we even going to sure, like, raising a kid here in, New York, it being a very, I guess, hazardous for a little kid, because it's like you take your eyes off your kid for 1 second, might walk on a train track or something, like, in the subways, might walk on train tracks or something like that. I guess, like, safety-wise, it's not the best place to raise a family, but, he brought up valid points, but at the same time, it's just, Kat was also dealing with it by herself, so anything he said was just kind of automatically the wrong thing, which isn't to blame him and say like she was wrong or anything like that. It's just, it's just in a situation like that, it's like they both have, it's just not an easy situation. It's not something that's just be like, oh yeah, like, everything's going to fall in line. Things are actually going to get very scattered having a kid because it add more on top of it. But we ended up finding out that she wasn't pregnant, which she's partly relieved, and so is he, both to a small degree. But there is a part of Kat that was like, "Oh man, I actually kind of like being a mom," But Vincent would like to be a dad, but it's just like in his mind he can't even think that far ahead because he's so concerned about like it's just they finally got a point where they can just be them. It's like the thought of just adding a kid to it when they've only just found themselves. I mean, truth be told, is they still haven't really even found themselves out of their situation. Like they've always had this world of like, oh, dealing with beasts, dealing always danger around the corner. That's what the relationship has always kind of been built around. It's like they still haven't found themselves outside of that. They've had small breaks in between, like the whole like honeymoon, but that didn't last long. So it's like they really haven't had a chance to find themselves as a couple, in my opinion, outside of this life they've led. So it's like, really, can you really say bring a kid in? It's the right thing to do. So, but the very fascinating thing about having that, going back to the assassin bit, is because he is an assassin. He was so like, Vincent's like, okay, you're trying to kill me, but should you really be trying to kill me? Aren't you supposed to bring me back alive? And the guy's like, nah, that's not my order. So it's like, what was the whole point of that then? And so it's like, I thought the point, I guess we were all under the assumption, it's like, oh, wanted Vincent alive. It's no, Vincent can be dead. I just want to track him down. So it's like, what's that about? Like I said, I get the feeling it's more so for his DNA, whatever the case may be, wanting Vincent the Beast. It's just because of his DNA. They don't actually need him. So I'm very curious. I did kind of skip over the fact is we did have that beginning part, like what put all this in motion was that what's his name, Deputy Secretary Hale, being tortured, drowned, and like his family being threatened. So if Vincent and Kat hadn't got there in time, he would have been, would not have ended very nicely. So I was actually halfway expecting at some point, during the whole thing, for him to actually spill his guts and be like, okay, I'll tell you. I mean, granted, in a situation like that, even if he spoke, that guy still would have killed him and his family nonetheless, just because he can't have any witnesses. So, but it does make you, like, to me, maybe there is an ulterior motive as to why the whole bounty, reason why Vince is being hunted. But to me, it's got to be DNA reasons why. It's just like, oh, they want, maybe someone's trying to start the project up again, and with him being the last one, it's like which that's actually happened before, because the person who helped start it actually tried to restart it later on, didn't he? I mean, because basically it was in season 2 when Vincent had to hunt him down. I don't think he restarted it. It's just like Vincent was ordered to take him out because he was a loose end. I don't remember. I mean, like I said, he was brought up to a small degree in this episode. It was Kyle, because basically Heather kind of blabbed about Kat being DHS. But he's still my number one suspect. I mean, who knows? By the end of it, we might find out that it might be someone from the distant past that we've come across before. It might be someone whose name was brought up, but we never really knew them. It might be Kyle. I'm starting to doubt myself. It's like he's still at the top of my list, but I'm pretty sure it's probably not going to turn out to be him. I'm kind of hoping it is, just because I feel like it's a betrayal you won't see coming. I mean, I feel bad for Heather, though, just because it'd be one more, like, relationship that didn't work out for her. And it turns out, oh, he was using her the entire time, so that sucked. I'm surprised Kat handled that as much, like, like Kyle still being in her life. It seems like, I was like, oh, I thought, like, the way she brought him up so nonchalant, I was like, really? I thought you were keeping that hush hush. It just kind of happened last episode, so I was like, oh, you're actually telling her, and she didn't say anything about it, so I guess they're just kind of accepting it, because they're kind of like, we can't keep her sheltered, can't keep her from living her life just because the way our situation is. That's not fair to her. Maybe they didn't have that conversation, but I can assume. To me, the funniest thing in this episode was the whole JT situation, trying to pretend to be a DHS agent to like all the people in the blogosphere that are looking into Beast, and those 3 people showed up and they zapped him, and they thought he was the Beast. He's like, do you think I was the Beast? If I was, I'd rip out of these chains, and basically saying I'm a nobody. I have no job. I quit my job. I don't have a girlfriend. And just like, he's like, I'm nothing, I'm nobody. And he's just like the entire time you see those three just kind of like, wow, this is like, I had to laugh a little bit because I was like, and just like a poor JT, it was that kind of laugh because it's like, man, that's so depressing. And even one of the guys was like, man, this guy's more pathetic than we are. And JT's kind of like, well, thanks. It sucks, dude. I felt so bad for him. It's just like he's just beating himself down, especially like when it was all said and done. It's like, for one, these these people who look like they might be college students themselves ended up getting the upper hand on him. Granted, they had a stun gun, but still, nevertheless, they got the upper hand on. And I love the fact is he was just kind of like, I don't even want to talk about it. I did love the fact is that Kat kind of what led to that was because Kat was like, yo, work with JT. And she's like, yo, we broke up, right? She's like, I'm not telling you to sleep with him, just work with him. As a friend, that's a little insensitive of you. It's like, I know, it's just kind of at the moment, at the time, it's just like, okay, things are kind of, we need to hurry up and figure things out. But it's like, you're being a little insensitive to like your best friend's recent heartbreak. It's kind of like, you could have, be a little, just like a little more understanding. It's a little weird and awkward. They just broke up and, working together like that, which I was kind of sad to hear that. Granted, they're not fully broken up. I mean, I guess, in a sense they are, in a sense they're not, because obviously Tess is like, I still care for you, and that's not going to change just because we're not together. You still got to go out and figure out what you want to do. Well, she's still not sure, but, nevertheless, Tess is going to be there to support him as well as everyone else. But you see it a little bit in the way they were talking to each other, that it's still there, that spark. So I feel like once JT finds out what he wants in life, they will, find their way back to each other. It'd be kind of interesting to see. I mean, just because I love me some romantic drama, it'd be kind of interesting to see, like, if, maybe certain, like, a new guy will pop up in the series and start hitting on Tess and complicating things, and it's JT on the outside just being like, man, he's hitting on my ex-girlfriend. It's like, yeah, that is your ex-girlfriend. Yeah, but we haven't been broken up that long. And then he starts getting mad at Tess because he's like, Tess isn't telling him, like, shutting him down immediately and stuff like that. So it'd be kind of interesting to see that. Because JT's never really had any competition for Tess's heart. Like, I mean, kind of, sort of, when he had to kind of prove to her brothers that, kind of prove himself to her brothers. That was as far as that went. But, I mean, Kat even had to with the whole, what was his name? I forgot. He was in season 1 and season 2. I don't even remember his name now, and it's gonna bother the crap out of me. He was the other beast. First appeared in season 1, but then he was in season 2. It's gonna bother the hell out of me. Freaking Gabe, that's what it was. Literally just came to me. It took me a while. It was rolling around in my head. A lot of that, me stopping to having to think about it, is getting cut out. But nevertheless, I remembered it on my own. I didn't have to look it up. I'm so proud of myself. Most likely you won't believe me, but that's fine. I'll know deep down in my heart that I didn't have to look it up. I know it's such an insignificant thing to kind of get stuck up on, but nevertheless, it was just something that, stuff like that, when I know the answer and it's buried somewhere in my mind, but I can't get to it, that just irritates me more so than anything. Nevertheless, moving on. But, that's kind of like her only situation where she kind of had to deal with competition. I mean, granted, there was the whole Vincent and Tori thing too, as well as his ex coming back. His ex kind of from his previous, his normal human lives. Really, all I can say, it's a very interesting episode with some very interesting new developments. We're still no closer to finding out necessarily who is this buyer, but like I said, we made that huge discovery that it isn't, that they want to capture Vince and they want him dead. Plus, we see, them struggling. Like, it finally, because it isn't something they've ever brought up as like, oh, kids, it's something that I think Kat had only really thought about this episode because she saw the kid. Plus, she was she had missed her period, so it was just kind of like, it was there. Like, it never been something that they'd ever discussed before. But yeah, man, I don't know. All around very interesting episode. Very interested to see where we go next week. But that's really all I want to talk about for this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.